and then we get into Tai Chi basics. So it's all about balance and connective tissue and bone density. People don't realize that Tai Chi, we do knocking or tapping, which stimulates the osteophytes. So I too am a proponent of building the bone tissue. The water element, in fact, is the winter time that we work specifically on bone density.
Cool.
So there's a lot to learn.
Cool.
So,
Thank you. And for anyone who is in the area still on April 29th, go ahead and pass some of these around if you're interested in coming to a free event. She's going to be in Lakes Park at 10 o'clock on the final Saturday of this month.
Yeah, I'll give them out later. Okay.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Very
Put
good.
them on the table with us.
Yes, please. Thanks, Candy.
Okay. And then let's go to Joyce. Joyce.
Hi, I'm Joyce. I'm from Massachusetts, and I first learned of
Where at?
Dr. McCormick, Chelmsford, on the east side. I know you're more west, but I first learned about Dr. McCormick at an osteoporosis workshop, which was held in Westford, Massachusetts. The woman who gave the workshop who mentioned Dr. McCormick.
Who was that?
Her name is Cindy. Her last name I can't think of at the moment.
What town was that?
In Westford.
Oh.
She's also a yoga instructor, and I think she said she had seen you as a patient at one time, but this was a few years ago, so.
As my secretary, Chris says, and I'd say, who's Mrs. Jones? And she said, you just saw her this morning.
Yeah, I know.
Because
The
I
names
see
are-
so many people and it's like, oh my God.
I can picture her, and I still get notices on her yoga classes, but I can't think of her name. But she mentioned you, so I went home and researched, and I got your first book and read that. You have lots of good information to share. And I since been on your website, I ordered some of the supplements. Then I saw your new book come out, I ordered it immediately. And I have it here, maybe you can sign it for me.
Please do a review on Amazon.
I will,
Thank
definitely,
you.
yeah, I haven't looked through it real good, but I've skimmed some of the pages and I'm liking it so far. Lots of valuable stuff in there. So, yeah, so that Massachusetts connection
Isn't that cool?
came up,
Yeah, and she just saw it come up somewhere in.
Yeah, I
in,
saw this talk
social
come up
media somewhere.
either Facebook or some other
Mhm.
thing, and I was excited because I had always wanted to see you speak, and we're in Massachusetts, never did it. Now we're here in Florida for the winter, and here it is, lo and behold, half a mile up the street.
You come far
So-
to see someone who's a neighbor.
Yeah, so very excited that you were here to do this.
Great, well,
And
we're happy that you found it and that you guys
Yeah.
can meet. Nice. Hi, and your name is?
I'm Barbara Kelly, and I came with Dee.
Okay.
And I've heard a lot about the Lotus Blossom Clinic, so I'm happy to be here. And I have osteopenia that's turning, even a little bit worse. So anything that can help with increasing bone density, because my doctor recommended injections, and I really don't prefer not to do that. And I am taking some bone supplements, which help with my last bone density test. I've improved, so, and I work out all the time, I use weights, I think I'm doing everything I can, but maybe I can learn a little bit more, it'd be nice.
Great, great. And we'll talk more about what things you can do to help in future too. So, Candy.
So I'm Candy Love, and I also work here, as Deb said already. I teach yoga, do massage, and a variety of other things, all of which relate to bones, because it's the base, and there's a lot of yoga studies on how to improve osteo with yoga, a lot of things on massage, how to improve with, osteo with massage, so it's all thing, and so I was delighted to then add more knowledge, again, and speaking the praise that she's a forerunner, and I know you haven't even paid her to do it, but she's really good. You might want to consider that. Any case, I'm delighted that you came this way.
Very good, thank you, Candy. And Candy began helping me with with scoliosis many years ago. And I used to walk with a click every time I moved my right leg, it would click. And she taught me how to walk again in 3 different sessions, separated out by many weeks. I haven't clicked since, and that's been 9 years or something now.
Yeah.
8 or 9 years, yeah.
So now you could sneak up on people.
Right. Kathy.
I'm Kathy, and I am in full-blown osteoporosis. I've had 4 back fractures in 3 years. And I'm here obviously because I'm trying to figure out what I need to do.
Okay, good, we're happy you're here.
I'm happy to be here.
And let's go back to Dr. Nonine.
So I'm Nonine, and I'm here because I want to learn preventative medicine to keep everything going and to be able to share the info with other people. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Doris.
I'm Doris Borkstrom, and I live in New York and here. And I was lucky enough when I came here to come to this wonderful place. I'm busy, so I don't get to do everything I want to do. So I'm working on that for next year. But I was told 15 years ago that I had osteoporosis and I should take Actinol. And I didn't believe it because of how active I am. And then I had gone to a naturopath, and he looked at the test and he said, they're comparing you to someone who is much, much younger. So I never took it. And so I'm still interested in anything I can do not to take medication. I'm happy to be here.
Good, thank you, glad you're here.
Patty. Yes, Patty Wilson. I'm a theta healing practitioner. I do intuitive counseling through my business, The Spiritual Coach. And this morning I just did a mediumship circle here.
Yay!
With Candy.
Promotion.
And some other people. Yeah, so I do maybe 4 times a year during season these mediumship circles. And sometimes theta healing circles.
Mm-hmm.
And I have osteopenia.
I'm sorry, when's your next one?
Probably the fall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's probably early November.
Okay.
But get in touch and I'll put you on the list, so I'll contact you when I have a date.
Hopefully you'll be here still.
Yeah, we will.
I missed today, and you have osteopenia, I'm sorry.
Yes, and I have osteopenia.
Okay, so kind of a typical condition for you to hear about with those of us in, above the 60-year-old kind of range, that it becomes more and more common. And it's taken us a while to get here, but you're evidence of the fact that you can, once you've gotten there, you can go back. Even if your numbers and everything are going down, you can turn around. And I've done that with osteopenia years ago, like 14 years ago, and took the DEXA measurements to see. You'll probably talk about the quality of bones though, as well as just the density measurements. But Dr. McCormick, we're just delighted to have you here because I've been watching you on YouTube and reading the book now, and I'm thrilled with it. This book it's a great reference manual, but it's really a great talk to the kind of person that's just needing the information manual. It also talks technical in certain places, technically speaking. So there's some panels in certain pages, and I'm like, oh, technical, I got it. So love it. This book is called Great Bones and Taking Control of Your Osteoporosis, and this is Dr. Keith McCormick, and he has graciously come down here from Massachusetts. What's the weather like up there, Doc?
Sure.
Chilly. Okay. I thought it would be good for people just to really understand more of your background, how you got here, and where you had to go, to what depths, to find your way back up. Because if you can do it, anyone can do it. You had multiple fractures over the space of, 5 years or so?
I've had 12 fragility fractures, but I've actually had like 23 fractures in my whole life.
Oh.
But so it's like when somebody breaks a bone, it's like to me, it's like, okay, that's okay.
You get over it.
You'll get over it. But I mean, I don't mean to make light of it because it is a huge issue, especially if you start having multiple vertebral fractures. It's a big deal, One fracture here and there is not a big deal to me. I only say that because I know that you can come out of it and be okay, you know? So I think, you know, I have so many people that come to my office and they are in tears because they're afraid and they've lost hope and they've gone to their MD and their MD sits down for 3 minutes and, you know, here's your prescription and they're out of there. And so there's no hope given. There's no explanation given of this whole thing. So it's this big mystery disease, you know? And so that's why I wrote my first book. That's why I wrote the second book. The second book was 950 pages. My son's an editor. He said, "Dad, nobody's going to read that." So I chopped it down to 700. And, you know, so here I'm going to try and talk for an hour, and it's like, okay, what do I talk about? There's so many things to talk about. So it's a little group. So let me just I'll tell you a little bit about who I am,
Yeah,
and a little bit about osteoporosis, and then let's answer questions. You know, so I'm from Massachusetts, and I was diagnosed with osteoporosis when I was 45. Had some hip microfractures, and then I ended up having 12 fragility fractures in 5 years. But I'd had fractures before that weren't really fragility fractures. I've had some fractures, actually not really since, but for those 5 years after I found out osteoporosis, I was just like, you know, I couldn't lean up against the wall and without breaking a rib. I was just really breaking easily. And now I don't. I mean, I do Ironmans. You know, I crashed on my bike, and you know, so you really can come out of this. So, and how do you do that? You know, how do you get from being really bad off to being safe? And it's a huge journey. You don't do this in 6 months, and I think that's what people don't understand, you know, and that's why I'm a big proponent of drugs, because drugs do get you out of the hole, get you out of dangerous way while you're changing your body, and then 3 years later you don't have to take these drugs anymore. And people think, oh, if I take the drugs I have to be on it forever and ever. That is not true at all. You get, you know, if a person has really poor bone density, they get themselves out of that hole, and then you can stay out of the hole. And I think, you know, if I had to pick certain things that were so important, we all, you know, of course, nutrition, your gut health, things like that, but what are the specifics about nutrition, and why is nutrition so important? And there's just so many little facets of you know, yeah, you gotta take your vitamin D for calcium absorption. Yeah, you have to have vitamin K to put it where it should go and things like that. But I think people don't understand that there's even, you have to go down even further, you know, to the nerves and to the endothelium. Like, I don't know if people have heard of the glycocalyx of the endothelium. So inside of blood vessels, in the little bitty capillaries, they are lined with what's called the glycocalyx. And that is areas of, it's surrounding in that tube, in that endothelium, of glucose molecules. And when those glucose molecules are correct, everything works real well. When they're not, things go to hell. And that's one of the reasons why high fructose corn syrup is so bad for you, because the whole endothelial system really degrades. And the same glycocalyx, the same sugar molecules that govern, that allow receptors to work properly, what allows signaling molecules to work properly, those are also around all the cells in your body, the osteoblasts, the osteoclasts. And when those cells don't work properly because of what's around them, then they don't get the signals from your parathyroid gland, they don't get your signals from the thyroid gland, they don't get your signals from all the what's called pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory cytokines that are in your body. So everything has to work well. One of the chapters in the book talks about every single organ of the body and how that relates to your bones. And I talk about your skeleton as the center of the universe, because it is the center of you, because everything wraps around your bones. You know, that's the inside of you. And all your organs talk to your skeleton talks to all your organs. When I was 45, that's when I started to break, and I'm not sure why, but you know, that was just, you know, this doesn't happen overnight. You know, things creep up on you, and so, you know, that's why I'm a big proponent of bone density machines, bone density exams. Everybody should have a bone density. If you know people who are 50 years old and 45 years old who haven't had a bone density yet, encourage them to get a bone density. You know, it's like when you go to your doctor and you're 30 years old, they're taking your blood pressure. Why are they doing your blood pressure? To make sure, you know, looking for heart issues, right? They're doing breast exams, looking for breast cancer. They're doing rectal exams for men. They don't actually do that anymore as much. They do PSAs, looking for prostate cancer. But if osteoporosis is, there's more people with osteoporosis than breast cancer, cardiovascular disease, and prostate disease, and combined, why aren't they just doing a bone density on everybody? And it's like most people were told, well, you'll get your bone density when you're 60. Well, by then it's a little, you know, now our window of opportunity isn't there. It's much more difficult to come back after 60 than it is to come back at 50. And I think the reason why MDs do that is because they don't have any tricks in their bag except drugs. And so they think, well, there's nothing I can do until the person gets to be, you know, has osteoporosis, and then I try to prevent them from fracturing, but with a drug. But there's so much you can do that they don't, you know, talk about and that they don't know about. So one of the first things everybody should do is, besides getting your bone density, is laboratory tests. So have you and other people who have osteoporosis, has your doctor done bone turnover markers? That's one of the most important things to do.
Bone turnover?
Markers. So biomarkers. Laboratory tests, the ones that I use are C-peptide and what's called P1NP, or pro-collagen type 1 N-terminal propeptide. It's called P1NP, and it is a bone formation marker. And why do we need these bone turnover markers? Because, I'm sorry, what was your name, ma'am?
Oh, Barbara.
Barbara. You know, you were saying, well, you know, you want to know what you can do, you know, to ward this off and not get that. Well, if you've had a bone resorption marker, a C-peptide, then you would know what you have to do. It's that simple, you know. And but I'm sure your doctor didn't order it, you know.
Yeah.
And all they do is they look at a bone density and say, okay, well, you're a negative 2.4, you're not osteoporotic, you don't need anything. Now you're negative 2.5. It's like this magic number of negative 2.5. It's like before you were fine and now you're not fine. That's not the way it is, you know. But you know, the bone density scores were just made up by a bunch of white men sitting in some, you know, office one day, and they came up with a negative 2.5, and that's this magical number of, okay, now we have a disease, but at negative 2.4 we don't have a disease. It doesn't make any sense. But when you do bone turnover markers, now you can see a little bit into the quality of bone. And as Ms. Martin said, you know, this isn't just about bone density, this is about bone quality too. And a bone density machine only gives us bone density. That's 50% of the game. Bone strength is a combination of density and quality. And so the problem is we don't have a lot of tools for looking at bone quality. Has anybody heard of a TBS, trabecular bone score? So at TBS, is called a trabecular bone score. And there's not very many facilities that have this computer add-on capability of a bone density machine, but it's really good. So it's not an examination, it's a computer add-on to a DEXA, to a bone density. So if you haven't had a TBS, it's a really good thing to get because it tells you about what's called trabecular connectivity. The inside of your bones is the trabecula. The outside of bones is the cortex. So the inside of all these struts and beams that give bone is lightweight, but it's strength. So if those struts and beams are disconnected, you can add all the bone density you want to that bone, and it's not going to do you much good at all. And that's what the bisphosphonates do. That's what bisphosphonates, the Actonel, Fosamax, Beniva, Reclass, and then Prolia, which is what's called a rankle inhibitor. But they all just give you bone density. If you have poor bone quality, if you have disconnectivity of these trabecula, they don't do you that much good. The anabolics help. Forteo, Timlos, Evenity, Prolia a little bit, but not a lot. But they're anabolic, and then they actually grow bone, so they can grow trabecula. The TBS is so you call up a hospital and say, hey, Miami Hospital, can I speak to radiology? Radiology comes back, and all you have to do is say, is your DEXA TBS have TBS capability? Do you have TBS capability DEXA? That's all you have to ask. And the TBS is a computer program. It costs the hospital $25,000, maybe $30,000 now. So $7,000 a year prescription fee. So for a hospital, it's nothing, but it gives great information. In Massachusetts, we only have 10 of them that are available to the public. So there's not very many, because we're a big medical state up in Massachusetts. So it's hard to find them, but you just call around and ask if it's worth having. The reason why it's worth having it is because you got to know where the heck you are. Let's say you're a negative 3.0. Well, are you a negative 3.0 with good quality or poor quality? Makes a big difference, Makes a big difference because if it's poor quality, you might not have the luxury of attacking this just through nutrition and exercise. You might have to certainly go through medication to get you to a certain point, and then, and not and then, but you're all the while you're doing all the other stuff, but then you're getting yourself out of the hole, and then things will be fine. But if you have a negative 3.0 and you have good quality, there's probably not a good, no reason to go to do a medication. Just do all the good things that, we know to do. Exercise, good nutrition. What's the most important thing to do? Gut health. And why is the gut health the most important thing? Because if you have a poor digestive tract, not only you're not going to absorb things, but 70% of your immune system is in your gut. And why do I care about the immune system? Because the osteoclasts, the cells that break down bone, so there's three types of cells. The osteoclasts break down bone, the osteoblasts build up bone, and the osteocytes kind of oversee everything. Well, the osteoclasts are a form of a white blood cell. So they came from what's called the hematopoietic stem cells that also give us the white blood cells. So they speak the same language as a white blood cell. So if your gut is filled with inflammation, and you have IBS, and you have whatever, then you're producing all these what's called pro-inflammatory cytokines, and that stimulates the osteoclasts to break down bone. And how do you know if you're one of those people that's happening? Get the C-telopeptide, get the bone resorption marker. There's N-telopeptide too. Some doctors use N-telopeptide. The urine isn't very good. You can do a spot urine NTX. The 24-hour urine NTX is a little better. The serum NTX is better yet, and the blood CTX is the best. That'll tell you how much activity is going on with those osteoclasts. And if it's high, you need to drive it down. And you can drive it down by improving your gut, maybe you have gluten sensitivity, maybe you have dairy sensitivity, maybe you have soy sensitivity, maybe you have an overgrowth of bacteria in your gut. There's ways to look at that. You can do one of the tests that I like to get on people, if they have bloating, constipation, diarrhea, different things like that. There's what's called a GI map, which is a really good stool analysis to get. You do that, you see what kind of bacteria are growing in their gut, you see if they have good pancreatic enzyme production. If they don't, then you can have them take pancreatic enzymes. You can see if they have fat buildup in their stool. If there's fat, that means they're not digesting fats. Why do I care about that? Well, vitamin D, vitamin K are both fat-soluble vitamins. You know, everything is all connected. So if you've got fat in your stool, you're not absorbing those vitamins. But your MD, I shouldn't say your MD, your doctor, your healthcare practitioner, whoever it is, whether it's a nurse practitioner, PA, MD, DO, naturopath, whoever, they need to be doing lab tests. And my book outlines all those lab tests that are important. There's probably 60, 70, 80 lab tests in there. You don't need all of them, but you need a basic core of labs done. And the bone turnover markers are really important. A drug cannot be prescribed unless, it is, I shouldn't say it can't be, it is all the time, prescribed without these drugs, without these turnover markers and other labs, but they shouldn't be. Because there's lots of different flavors of osteoporosis. There's lots of, some people have high bone turnover osteoporosis, some people have low bone turnover osteoporosis. Some people have osteoporosis because they have hyperparathyroidism. Some people have diabetes or high sugar content, and that's gonna make their bone density kind of look okay, but they're really fragile because they have really poor quality bone. A person with diabetes might look fine on their bone density, but their quality is really poor. So just because you go in and you have your bone density done doesn't mean that, oh, here's your drug, you're fine, get out of here. Or take your vitamin D, your calcium, your vitamin K, get out of here. It's way more complex than that.
Dr. McCormick, I was going to ask you, how many physicians do you think as a percentage would have this information? For example, you're up in Massachusetts, and I think we might be able to talk with you and work with you, is that correct?
Yeah. I do consults,
yeah.
There are not very many.
That's what I was.
But that's why the book. So,
Yeah.
and I know it's a little thick, it's a little, of a challenge, but
It's thinner than it was, though.
it's thinner than it was. Thank you. I love you. But I did it because, and like I said, my son is an editor for Foreign Affairs magazine in New York City, and he writes books, and and he said, "Dad, you can't do that." I said, "I have to. It is not within me to write a crappy, dinky little book that just glosses over things, And I respect the intelligence of my people out there, and it takes a little bit to get through it. And when you get to a certain point, you go, "Oh my God, Keith, this is way too much. Skip that and go to the next page," But you'll be able to now go into your doctor and essentially direct him or her the way you want them. And I have an MD, and I love her. I think she's great. She said no bloody thing about osteoporosis. But if I want some, I just essentially tell her. I say, this is the way it is. And if she doesn't want to play my game, I'm out of there, Because I'm the boss, and you guys are the boss. And I can tell you something, and you don't have to believe me, and you don't have to do what I want you to do, but I'm still on your side. I'm still with you all the way. And that's the way your MD should be. Your MD should be on your bench with you the whole time. You are the head honcho.
It's a partnership.
It's a partnership, yes. And you can have a better, that's why I read the book. I want there to be information so you can feel more confident, so you can go in and when he or she says, oh, those bone turnover markers don't mean anything, and everything in there is 1,200 references, so you can say, but Dr. Smith, it says right here in the New England Journal of Medicine, blah, 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 okay? Well, that's not some crazy chiropractor saying something. That's the medical profession saying it, and there's basis to it. So that's why there's so many references in there, and I don't say anything there unless it's referenced. So ask me some questions and we'll do some specifics.
I wanted you to get into a little bit of the hormonal therapy component of this. It sounds like you have some ideas on that I'd like them to be exposed to.
I'm a big proponent of estrogen therapy. So in 2002, I don't know if everybody remembers, the Women's Health Initiative study came out and said, oh my goodness, there's a huge increase there's an increase in cardiovascular disease, stroke, thrombosis with estrogen. And all the MDs in the country said, oh, no more estrogen for these women. They pulled them off. They said, it's terrible. And what they were looking at was 0.625 milligrams. A lot of these patients were 65 years and older. Some smoked, some had cardiovascular disease. Some people just shouldn't have been on this that were on it. And like I said, they were on Premarin and the fake estrogen. They weren't on bioidentical. So you're talking totally apples and oranges. When you're talking about a concocted estrogen made from horse urine and and then doing bioidentical, and this is 6.625, and you can take a person really low dose, even 0.014, and get improvement with estrogen. So estrogen does a lot of things. Its main things that it does, and this is why when women go through menopause at 50 or 53 or whatever, they start getting allergy symptoms sometimes, because it calms down that immune system. Well, if it calms down your immune system, who's the little guy in your bones that's going to calm down? The osteoclasts, because they're a form of a white blood cell. And so as soon as that estrogen's gone, then the osteoclasts go, oh, Jesus, nobody holding me back. I'm going to gobble up bones. And low dose, ultra low dose or low dose estrogen keeps those osteoclasts calm. And bioidentical is even better. You don't have to do that, but it is much, much better. It's a very different, has a very different action on the estrogen receptor, and but it also does other things. It, vascular wise, it improves things. Brain fog, gut health, all kinds of things. So typically, I don't like women to start on estrogen after maybe 7 years past menopause. I make it, if you do ultra low dose though, they're 10, 15 years past menopause and they're having issues, then I still think it's okay. Is it going to add bone density? Probably not. Is it going to add bone quality? Probably not. But it is going to really slow down the loss. So if you have a negative 3.4 and you've had a fracture, you can start taking estrogen, but that's not what's going to fix it. So it's good to a certain point, but it doesn't. And even in men, it's not the testosterone that's important. The testosterone is actually changed to estrogen, and then that's what helps the male. Did I answer?
Yeah, that's a great answer. And one of the other things too that I know there's still a lot of concern about is, are you seeing any people getting cancer, breast cancer,
No,
or so forth?
not with ultra low dose. It doesn't. Yeah,
Okay.
and if it's bioidentical, no, it's very, very safe.
Okay.
And what are you going to do before? Okay, one of the things that I do for every single thing is you do a baseline lab test for everything. So you get these core labs, and if you're thinking about estrogen, you get a baseline estrogen, and it has to be a sensitive or ultra-sensitive estradiol. If you just get a regular estradiol, it'll come back less than 20. Well, there's a lot of numbers between 0 and 20, so you get a sensitive estradiol, and it will tell you the exact number in picograms per ml. So let's say it comes back, you do a sensitive estradiol, your estradiol comes back less, a 2 or less than 2. Well, that's pretty low, So you start on an ultra low dose estradiol. 2 months later, you retest the sensitive estradiol, and it comes back. Let's say it comes back at 50 picograms per ml. It's too high, way too high. We don't need 50. We want just between 20 and 25, something like that, picograms per ml. That's what's going to calm those osteoclasts down. And if we have a 25 versus a 50 or 60, is a 50 or 60 going to do a better job? No, it's not. It just puts the person more at risk. So we want to keep them, we want to do its job, but you don't need so much that now we have a risk for thrombosis, cancers, things like that. And you put the person on a low dose and they're 20 picograms per ml, there's not any risk.
Do you also use progesterone?
Yes, maybe 100 milligrams progesterone. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so I hear some doctors talking about this symphony of the various hormones. And it's been a real learning process for me as I've gone into this particular realm of discovery. And I'm shocked at the integration of how everything is with the bones.
Everything talks to each other.
Even,
And not only that, on the cell itself,
Mhm.
you have these receptors side by side. So you have an estrogen receptor here and a parathyroid receptor right there.
Wow.
So all these hormones talk to each other at the cell surface.
It's just incredible. And I know probably everyone knows someone who's died of pancreatic cancer. And you wonder, where does that come from? And there's ideas about these things that might have to do with chemicals in the environment, for example. And again, everything can have any multitude of possible causes. However, I learned that the osteoclastin, no, what is it? Something classin. Anyway, that it is something that is produced that is bone related. And if it's not there, it's not working with the insulin, it's an insulin resistance kind of problem.
You're talking osteocalcin.
Osteocalcin, yeah.
So what is osteocalcin? Osteocalcin is produced by the osteoblasts, and it has to be carboxylated by vitamin K. That's what vitamin K does. It carboxylates or activates osteocalcin. And one of my, a little bit of a pet peeve, mine's many pet peeves, okay. But one of my pet peeves is people who take 45 milligrams of vitamin K, because there's a Japanese study that showed that increased bone density, which has since been refuted. But you do not want to take 45 milligrams of vitamin K because that over-carboxylated, you need some under-carboxylated osteocalcin and you need some carboxylated osteocalcin. That's the way the world is, It's like my trees that I showed you, hugging each other, That everything has its good and its bad, but you do too much vitamin K, you do too much estrogen, you do too much parathyroid hormone, whatever, it's not good. You have to do just a little bit. And vitamin K is one of those things, because under-carboxylated osteocalcin helps you form testosterone. Well, testosterone is important for the female and the male too. It also has to do with maintaining good insulin production from the pancreas. So, which puts me, this is a great segue to another thing. I was talking to the main, I told this to Candy, I think, to the main naturopathic society last weekend, and this woman came up to me afterwards. She says, I've never seen anybody so excited about osteoporosis before. But I do, I get excited about it. So osteocalcin, what was I going to tell you about osteocalcin? Energy. Your bones are your energy regulator. So they're amazing. So if you go through a bad time in your life where there's no food and everything, it gives you all the stuff it needs to survive that. But, so in times of when things aren't there, they're gonna give you everything you need. When everything is there and we have nutrients and stuff, then that's where it starts pulling in everything. And that's why it is people don't think of the skeleton as a hormone producer, but it does. It produces the osteocalcin, which is a hormone for insulin regulation. Not a huge impact on it, but it does have impact on it. So, yeah.
How much vitamin K do you recommend?
I think everybody should have about 1,000 micrograms of K1, 500 to 700 micrograms of K2MK4, and no more than 100 micrograms of K2MK7. So MK7 lasts a little bit longer, has a little bit longer half-life. Why is that important? Because you want to have a steady state of carboxylation of this osteocalcin. And the K2MK4 does more jobs. It's actually the better form. Just the K7, the MK7 lasts a little bit longer.
So with the K2.
K2 has the two forms, the MK7 and the MK4. Yeah.
Okay, and you recommend 1,000?
1,000 of K1, of the K2, MK4, 500 to 700 micrograms. You really only need 200 micrograms to get the carboxylation to what we need. You really only need 200. When you start pushing it and start doing, 15 milligrams, 30 milligrams, 45 milligrams of K2 and K4, these are pharmaceutical doses now. So, yeah, I'm not sure. You're doing maybe some good things, but you're doing maybe some bad things.
So after 65, your recommendation, what would be your first course? Is to do supplements? Or, and of
Depends
course,
on the person's.
it depends, on the severity.
Yeah.
But would you recommend supplements? Would you recommend, I would imagine the pharmaceuticals, if they're already in fracture stage, okay? But if they're not in fracture stage, thinking supplements?
Well, let's do the CTX first and see if it's high. So the CTX reference range is 37 to 1,037, which is silly, okay? The 1,000 point reference range for something is totally crazy. So at about 350 or above, you're gonna start losing bone. And below 350, you're not. So you're shooting for a CTX of about 350. So let's say it comes back at 600. Our job is to get it down. What are the things you can do to do that? Well, number one, gut health. Let's make sure that's down. Then I do antioxidants. Like, I'm a big proponent of alpha lipoic acid. Alpha lipoic acid is a fat and water soluble antioxidant, and acetylcysteine. So it gets into all the little nooks and crannies, and high oxidative stress, free radicals, all that stuff stimulates pro-inflammatory cytokines. Those stimulate the osteoclast to break down bone. So we want to calm down those pro-inflammatory cytokines. We want to get rid of those free radicals so that we don't have stimulation of those osteoclasts. Alpha lipoic acid is great at that. N-acetylcysteine, about 600 to 1,000 milligrams of N-acetylcysteine boosts what your estrogen does. So the combination between taking estrogen or the estrogen you have, maybe you have 8 picograms per ml, 10 picograms per ml. It might be enough, probably not, but it might be, 12 picograms per ml, maybe it might be okay, but for sure, throw in some NAC, maybe throw in some DHEA. So DHEA is called dehydroepiandrosterone, and it is a precursor hormone to estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone. So you want the substrate to be there so your body can make these hormones, and DHEA is a really good one to do. You have your MD test you for DHEAS. The S is the sulfated form or the storage form for DHEA. So you always get DHEAS, not DHEA, for testing. But then you can take micronized DHEA, 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams, 25 milligrams, depending on what your test comes back. you don't start taking supplements until you do the testing. You know, you don't know if you need 5 milligrams or 25 milligrams of DHEA. So you test, see where it is, you experiment, take 5 or 10, whatever. Same with estradiol. You don't know what level of estradiol you need to do unless you test for it. The CTX, if that's high, you take alpha-lipoic acid and acetylcysteine. I use berberine a lot. Berberine's a great herb to, it's a really good herb for gut health, and it also really helps calm down the osteoclast and actually boost osteoblastic activity. I'm a huge proponent of collagen. And why do I like collagen? Because collagen, part of collagen is absorbed as a peptide chain, not as the amino acids. So collagen itself is actually a pretty poor protein. It doesn't have tryptophan, which is an essential amino acid. It's kind of low on some of the other essential amino acids. But so it's not just, you know, you're not taking that just for the amino acids, but some of the peptide chains are intact, or absorbed intact, and they actually can go and stimulate receptors on the osteoblast to stimulate formation of osteoblastic activity. So in the osteoblast, talk to the osteoclast, everybody talks to each other, so we're trying to make everybody happy. We're trying to get those osteoblasts going as much as they can and calming down your osteoclast, and the antioxidants calm those osteoclasts. Collagen boosts your osteoblasts. And then you exercise. Why? Oh, and you eat protein. Why do you eat protein? Because bones are protein. And if you're not breaking it down, and you get bloating and stuff from protein, take in digestive enzymes so you can absorb it. But everybody should, in this room, is, you know, between 115, 140 pounds, something like that. You should all be 60 to 65, maybe 70 grams of protein a day. Well, I'll guarantee most of you don't get that much.
I do.
Yeah.
I'm a big protein.
Yeah, you
Whether
need-
it's vegetables or.
You need the protein.
I have
That's
to have it.
that's the basis of what your bones are. So, and then you exercise, because in the exercise stimulates your osteocytes. That's that third cell we talked about, and then they send out messages to the osteoblast to form bone. But how do they send out messages? They send out messages through these little canaliculi. Well, those little canaliculi have mechanotransduction capability. So fluid waves. Chi. That's right. Chi. And inside those fluid waves is inside of those little tubes have to be, you know, patent. They have to have a lining. The glycocalyx has to have a lining, and the fluid waves with chi and water has to be good, and that water has to be, you know, a certain acidity, a certain alkalinity, pH, to do a good job. And when you get deep down inside the bone, just a 0.05 pH change can increase osteoclastic activity. So your body pH is really important. You know, your blood pH should be like 7.3 to 7.4. When you start getting to 7.2 and 7.1, your body's going, oh, this is bad. And so it's doing all kinds of things to buffer those hydrogen ions. Hydrogen ions are acidic. And what is the first thing it does? It sends the, first thing it does is it goes to what's called the hydration membrane around bones. And a hydration membrane is filled with potassium and sodium. And that's what, and so there's the four main minerals for alkalinity are potassium, sodium, magnesium, and calcium. The magnesium and calcium are inside the bone. The sodium and potassium are on the outside of the bone. So we want to tap the outside of the bone. But if you're not eating lots of veggies, and if you're on a totally salt-restricted diet, which is terrible, just as bad as too much salt isn't good, too little salt isn't good, then that hydration membrane around the bones is doesn't have the minerals it needs to buffer these hydrogen ions, and then the parathyroid gland goes, okay, I'm gonna send out parathormone, that's gonna stimulate the osteoclast, and now we're gonna break down bone and tear down the bone. There, that releases the calcium, that buffers the pH of the blood, gets it back up to 7.3.
So would you say calcification, like I tend to do that, I was very acidic most of my life. I didn't hydrate, yada yada, as an athlete, a lot of free radicals, blah, blah, blah. So what would be something that would counter the calcification, or is it mostly caused by pH, or? Kinda
Really good question. That's where K comes in,
Yeah.
because K is putting things where it should go. But yeah, your pH balance, genetics. A lot of people just calcify. You take an X-ray and you see all the cartilage in here just calcified on people. That's they used
That's
to
my question.
They used to
The
say
breast.
that was all K, but
Okay.
now they say no, it's not. That there's more to it than just the K issue. So probably a lot of that is genetics. I talk a lot about genetics and epigenetics in the book, and how this stuff follows us forever, even if it's PTSD from our parents or their parents in the war. That stuff follows us, and that's why mind stuff is really important. That's why meditation and coming from a good place inside does help way more than than the establishment gives it credit for. But yeah, so I don't know. That's a really good question, and I don't know the in-depth answer to the calcification of the cartilage. Why does that happen?
Because that was in the milk duct, and it was 0 stage, and yet I had to have a lumpectomy and radiation and all this, and I really was against it. But my bones tend to do that, so I'm going to get the book for sure, and I'll be calling you, I'm sure, as well, because I'll be going for a lot of testing coming up. I keep trying to find, the right ones as I've spoken to Deb. So I think we're all kind of, it seems like as women, as we get older, post-menopause, we're very concerned about fractures. I don't know, I've fallen, I don't know how many times, and knock on wood, nothing. So other people, boom, like you were saying, so that those tests, there were 3 main tests. Where's the whiteboard here? I need to see that. But anyway, yeah.
I have a core, I talked about the core testing.
test.
It's a bone resorption marker for sure. That's the CPX.
Okay.
I typically don't always get a P1NP, the bone formation marker, unless I'm going to recommend to that person to do an anabolic drug, because if their bone density and bone quality is so poor that they need an anabolic, then I'm going to say, okay, let's get a P1NP and see what it is, and then you're going to start the anabolic. 3 months into it, we're going to repeat that P1NP to make sure that it's higher. So if it comes back at 40, then it comes back at 40 3 months later, the drug's not working. 5% of the time, the drugs don't work. These drugs, you're injecting themselves with the drug every day. They're expensive, and now you're going to do something for 2 years without knowing if it's working? That's crazy, So if your doctor says, oh, there's no need to do a baseline, then you explain it to him or her. Then can you guarantee me, doc, that this is going to work?
I've said that.
Yeah.
And you can guarantee it if the bone turnover marker comes back higher. Then it's working. We know it's working. But unless you do baseline and then a turnover marker afterwards, you don't know if it's working. So.
Thank you.
And the bone turnover markers tests are on page 144.
So I talk a lot about like I said, there's like 4 resorption markers, and there's just the 2 really, well, there's 3 formation markers, but the P1NP and the CTX are the ones to do it.
Yeah.
Let me just, before I answer.
Oh, yes, my doctor wanted to put me on Prolia.
Well, we're going to talk about Prolia. That's
So
a great
I
question.
looked that up, but it said you can only be on it for 2 or 3 years, and is that correct?
2 years.
2 years.
I'll go through Prolia
Right after
in a
that.
second. Let me finish the core drugs, the core test. So homocysteines are really a good one to get. That's a quality marker. It's an inflammatory marker. We'll talk about that in there. C-reactive protein. It's good to get a 24-hour urine calcium to see if you're losing calcium, and always stop supplemental calcium for 48 hours before and during the collection of urine. And speaking of which, what you do for your bone turnover markers, or the CTX is very, very sensitive to food and time of day, so you always do it fasting. You always do it first thing in the morning at 7 to 8. If they can't take it, the blood draw till 10, don't do it. And stop all biotin and collagen for 48 hours before. So the CTX is very squirrely. So if you don't do it right, it's not going to give you good information. And people come to me all the time and they say, oh, look, my bone density got better. Everything's okay. Well, then I look at the bone density. That's why I have a whole chapter on how to read bone densities. And you don't have to be a great I'm not teaching you how to read bone density. I'm telling you how to, oh, geez, this isn't right. This isn't right. Because 60% of bone densities are done wrong or read wrong. So I show you the flags to look at. So when people come back and say, oh, geez, my bone density is much better, it's not. It might not be. It might be, but then you can look at things that say, okay, well, maybe it isn't. Or, the same with the lab test, the CTX. Why my CTX? I did a CTX on myself the other day, the other month, and I went to see my MD for something totally different. She said, hey Keith, you want any other labs? I said, sure, throw in a CTX. She said, okay. And so I went down to the lab at 11:30 in the day. I'd eaten breakfast at 11:30, and my CTX was 100. My CTX is always a 400. It was 100. Well, it wasn't right, So a wrong lab test is worthless. So the book kind of tells you how to wade through all that kind of stuff. Should I talk about Prolia or?
Well, if I could, one question. The way that I see what happened to me was I had Graves' disease.
Take good notes, Bart.
Severe case of it, and they told me I was in my early 50s. It's not if you're going to get osteoporosis, it's when.
Right.
Does it make a difference if it's a disease type that caused?
Some diseases will decrease your quality, like I said, diabetes does. So a negative 3.0 with diabetes person is a big deal. People like me and you, if you don't have diabetes, negative 3.0 is not great, but it's not the end of the world either, Graves' disease, the problem with that is, yes, it does impact your quality, and that's why not as much maybe as the diabetes, but it does, and so yeah, you should. There's a lot of reasons for that, but TBS helps. How if I just go through Prolia real quick, because it is a kind of a fascinating drug. It's one of the worst drugs, and it's a good drug too. So
Good and bad.
There's about 10 drugs, okay, for osteoporosis. That's all. So it's pretty easy to learn them all. So there's 4 bisphosphonates: Fosamax, Actinub, Beniva, Reclass. I never talk about Beniva; it's the worst one. Don't ever do Beniva; it's terrible. But they only give you bone density. They don't give you any bone quality. How am I doing for time?
Oh, you are doing fine.
Okay.
We're at 3 o'clock.
So if you
have
get
till
sick of
3:30.
me, just say, Keith, cut it. Okay, so they give you anywhere between 1% and 3% of bone density in a year. Prolia is not a bisphosphonate. It is what's called a rankle inhibitor. Rankle, R-A-N-K-L, is receptor activated for nuclear factor kappa B. It is a protein that directly stimulates the osteoclast. So Prolia is an antibody against it, right? So if it takes away rankle, now it takes away osteoclastic activity. The osteoclasts, when there is no rankle there, they're calm. When the Prolia wears off after 6 months, the rankle goes up, the osteoclast, oh great, the antibody against the Prolia is gone. I'm going to gobble up all kinds of bones. The problem with Prolia is the drug company said 6 months is about the average that it works, so we'll give it a shot to the person every 6 months, Prolia shot every 6 months. The problem is there's a 210% variability in the action of Prolia on people. So some people works for 5 months, some 6 months, some 7 months, some 8 months, some even 9 months, okay? So, but 6 months is kind of is okay to do, except when we get to the end of, and I'm going to talk about that, to the end of when you're going to stop Prolia. But a lot of doctors say, well, throw the person on Prolia and just leave them on forever. The problem with that is osteonecrosis of the jaw, atypical femur fractures it is an issue, not only with the bisphosphonate, but also with Prolia. Anytime you over suppress the osteoclast, you get an increased risk for osteonecrosis of the jaw. Not in the first year, not in the second year, but after 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, then it does become an issue. And so this is one thing that virtually 99% of MDs will not know this, and so that's why you guys will know this, and that's why then you can educate them, is what happens to the osteoclasts when you're given Prolia. Well, they don't die and get sick and hide in a corner like with a bisphosphonate. They form into osteomorphs. So an osteomorph is this deflated osteoclast that is in a state of suspended animation, but they're deflated. And they coalesce into these islands of osteomorphs. So let's say now there's, these islands of 10, 20 osteomorphs floating around in your body. And the longer you're on Prolia, the more of these islands of osteomorphs you have floating around. And remember, these are osteoclasts that are educated. They know what their job is. They're not newbies on the block. They are tried and true osteoclasts that know how to break down bone, because you are a person with osteoporosis and you are breaking down bone, and then the doctor shoots you full of Prolia, and then that deflates these osteoclasts that know their business. But now they're just kind of like in this quiet state. But now you've been on Prolia for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, we have all these islands, and then you decide, well, I don't want to take this Prolia anymore. I'm going to get off of it. The second that Prolia wears off, all these osteomorphs burst forth, and they are ravaged. They are going to eat you to pieces. And that's why bone density plummets when you stop Prolia, and so you're at a much greater risk. You not only lose your bone density that you gain, but you're at a much, much higher risk for fracture than you ever were at the very beginning. And that happens within 3 to 4 months. It doesn't take long. So what do you do about it? Number one, you don't stay on Prolia for 5 years. I think you should stay on it for a maximum of 1.5 to 2 injections. That's it. And then you transition to 1 shot of Reclast. Reclast is that 4th bisphosphonate over here. And the reason why you do that is because that prevents that rebound effect from happening. So that's called a rebound. When the Prolia wears off and all those osteomorphs burst forth, that's called a rebound. But we're going to prevent that with Reclast. That prevention of Reclast has to happen properly, and you do that with a CTX. You do that by getting a baseline CTX, and then I walk you through that whole thing in the book. If you're going to transition from Prolia to Reclast, you transition by doing repeat CTXs from 5 months after the last shot, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. As soon as that CTX changes, as soon as that CTX gets higher, that's when you do the Reclast. Yeah.
So what are the mechanics of it that stop the rebound? The new one, what does it do to stop that?
The Reclast.
The Reclast stops the rebound because it's a poison. So now all these endomorphs burst forth into our osteoclast, and immediately they're clubbed down by this poison. It's a rat poison, essentially, So-
That's what I thought, does it just kill them off?
No, it doesn't kill them off.
So they're
It
not.
calms them
Once you
down,
find out.
but then all during that calming down phase, it's like a riled up hornet's nest. But over time, you go, okay, I get this. And then there's some death of them, and so after a year or so, when the reclass essentially, and reclass can last up to 3 years. It's a 1 year infusion that can last up to 2.5, 3 years. So just because it's told by your doctor, tells you, and your insurance company tells you it should be done every year, it doesn't mean anything. Look at the CTX. If you do a baseline CTX before you ever have a reclass, and it's an 800, you do 3 months later after you do the infusion of reclass, you do another CTX, and it's 100. Okay, it worked, right? You get to a year after you've done the reclass, you do another CTX, and it's still 100. It's working. It's not, your CTX isn't bouncing back. It's not at 300, 400, 500. It's still 100. It's still working. 6 months later, you do another one. If it's still 100, it's still working. There's no problem. You may have, because now you're eating better, you're taking N-acetylcysteine and alpha-lipoic acid, and you're doing Tai Chi, and you're doing and you're eating your protein, you're doing all the things, it might not ever get up to the 800 again, because you have improved your body. But in the meantime, you've staved off that fracture risk by taking the drug, doing a good thing to your body, but not a bad thing by doing it prolonged. And then at the end of it, everything's good.
What about the other drugs?
Okay, so we got the 4-bisphosphonates, then we have Prolia, then we have, I'm not even gonna talk about the SERMs, the selective estrogen receptor modulator, the raloxifene. I don't like that at all. It acts like estrogen, it causes thrombosis and all kinds of problems, so I don't even talk about the SERMs. We won't talk about them. Then there's HRT, which we talked about, the hormone, which I think is great, but it doesn't give you bone quality, and it doesn't give you a lot of density, but it staves off the loss. Then there's 3 anabolics. That's Forteo and Tymlos are 2 parathyroid injectables. Those are daily injection of. So you think, well, why are you injecting parathyroid hormone into your body if when people get primary hyperparathyroidism, and that causes bone loss, and that's what it does, primary hyperparathyroidism, where either there's a hyperplasia of all the parathyroid glands, there's 4 parathyroid glands in your throat that sense the amount of calcium that's in your blood. If the amount of calcium gets low, then these glands pump out parathormone to stimulate the osteoclast to break down bone and increase the calcium level in your body. So if the parathormone breaks down bone, why are you injecting this stuff in you? Well, the reason why is because when you inject the parathormone into your body, either by Forteo or Tymlos, they're 2 different drugs. They do a little bit different, which I won't get into why they're different, but they're a little bit different. There's a bolus of parathyroid hormone in you for 45 minutes, and then it's gone. It's broken down. The half-life is gone, and it's done. But during that 45 minutes that it's high in your blood, it is stimulating osteoblasts to form bone. But then those osteoblasts start forming bone, and then they say, okay, well, my job is to also talk to the osteoclasts and have them break down bone, because we're brothers in this. There's a good and there's bad. We need to build bone, we need to break down bone. But by the time the osteoblasts remember that they're supposed to tell the osteoclast to break down bone, the parathormone is gone in the blood, and then they go, oh, well, it's gone, so I guess I won't tell the osteoclast to break down bone. They've told them a little bit to break down bone, but not a lot. So the overall effect that there's more osteoblastic activity than osteoclastic activity, because it's only 45 minutes in your blood. If it was in your blood 24/7, then the amount that those osteoblasts are activated doesn't keep up with how much they've told those osteoclasts to break down. The osteoclasts win the game, and they break down more bone. But when it's only 45 minutes, the osteoblasts win. So that's Forteo and Tymlos. They give you 8 to 10% of bone density in the first year and a half. So much better than the than the bisphosphonates, and
What's the name of them again, those drugs?
there is teriparatide and amyloparatide. So teriparatide is Forteo, and the Tymlos is amyloparatide. And amyloid, so it's called Tymlos, Tymlos. And if you want a little technical, the Forteo gives you about 8 to 9% in the first year to year and a half. The Tymlos gives you 9 to 10%. The Forteo costs about $3,700 a month. The Tymlos is about $1,700 a month, and you don't have to refrigerate it. So you might not have your choice. It's the insurance company that tells you what to do. So then the last one is Evenity, and Evenity gives you about 12% of bone density in a year. So the best of all of them. It's over $100,000 for a year. It's an injection every month, and it is what's called a sclerostin inhibitor. So if I have a patient who has a negative 4.3 or worse, and they've had 2 fractures or 3 fractures, Evenity is the way to go. And the reason why is that we got to get that person out of crisis. If they've had 2 fractures, 2 vertebral fractures, in all likelihood they're going to have a 3rd vertebral fracture. It's called a fracture cascade, and that's when you start getting the Dowager's hump. And if you start getting a Dowager's hump, you start compromising cardiovascular integrity. Evenity is a great way to go, and or the Tymlos or Forteo too. But you got to stop that from happening. So the Evenity is what's called a sclerostin inhibitor. Sclerostin is a protein that's produced by the osteocytes, and it makes the osteoblasts not produce bone. So why would you want the osteoblasts not to produce bone? Well, you don't want to have osteoporosis, too light of bones, and you don't want to have osteopetrosis, too heavy of bones. So that's where sclerostin is. Sclerostin keeps those osteoblasts in check. So Evenity is an antibody against sclerostin. So it allows the osteoblasts to go hog wild and build lots of bone.
How do you feel about these drugs?
How do I what?
How do you feel about them?
I think they're great. I think all these drugs are absolutely lifesavers. I'm a chiropractor. I grew up in a totally no drug household.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I never took an aspirin. I've still never taken an aspirin.
You're in a no-drug clinic. Yeah.
I've still never taken an aspirin or
Yeah.
anything like that, you know, because I hate drugs. But I also know that osteoporosis can kill you. It can really compromise your life. I was really compromised, okay? I took Forteo. That's what got me out of the hole. I had a negative 4.5 spine, and I had hip fractures. I had 12 fractures in 5 years. I was crumbling. I didn't know what the heck was going on. I went to 5 endocrinologists. They just want to put me on drugs. And I'm saying, no, you guys, you don't understand. I'm not here for a drug. I'm here to learn why I have osteoporosis and fix it. I don't want to take any drug, okay? Well, that's when I started, and I realized that they don't know a bloody thing about this stuff, okay? So that's why I immersed myself into it. I didn't know anything about osteoporosis 20 years ago either, but now I do, because I immersed myself into it. But no, I'm totally not for drugs, but I am for these drugs temporarily. For 2 to 3 years, they get you out of trouble, so then that we can then do our job to get your body back to health. And that's the magic. That's what really works. It's like, why do I go to my MD? Because I hate to say this, but I'm using her. I'm using her to my advantage. I get her to do this or this because I'm the boss. Same way with the drugs. I don't like them, but I'm going to use them to the advantage that they can give me, and then I'm gone. I don't need that stuff, and I haven't taken a drug for 20 years now. But I did Forteo for 2 years, and Fosamax to back it up, because you have to back up the anabolics with something, with an anabolic, with an anti-resorptive. So I did 6 months of Fosamax, but then I haven't done any drugs. I got myself from a negative 4.5 to a negative 3.3 spine, and that's where I've been for 20 years. And I'm still a negative 3. Doesn't matter. I have osteoporosis, but I'm not fracturing, so why do I need to get any more?
So for 20 years, you haven't been on any drugs?
No.
So what are you doing?
I do exercise, which
Yeah.
I don't overly exercise, which I used to do. I do Ironmans and stuff, so I'm a little crazy. I won't tell you what I've done, but I've way too much. Okay, so I've dialed it back a little bit. I eat lots of protein, I eat tons of veggies, I take alpha-lipoic acid, berberines, N-acetylcysteine, I take my calcium, I take the K, the D, I do all the things that now are really simple stuff. It's not anything, earth-shattering or rocket science at all, but it works. It's just that if you're in a hole, you got to get out of the hole first.
Yeah, right.
And then this stuff keeps you out of the hole. It often can't pull you out of the hole because the hole's too deep. And I talk so much about epigenetics in the book because and your gut health was, I shouldn't say solidified, but it was almost solidified the first 3 years of your life, which is a big deal. If you have gut issues, if you started having gut issues when you're a kid, it's going to follow you forever, and that takes so hard. Like when I treat people with SIBO or overgrowth or something like that, that's a big deal. It's really hard to work with that stuff because their intestinal tract, the cells within their gut have grown to accept certain bacteria and not other bacteria. And genetically speaking, that's the way they are. To change them, it's really difficult. So, but you have to. But once you've changed the gut, then all these nutrients work. Yeah.
So what do you think about the fecal transplants? That they're
Oh,
talking
that's so cool. I think that's such a great
I'm
idea.
a science geek too, like
Yeah.
most of the people here.
I think that's so cool, but then,
Creepy.
creepy, but good. So everybody know what she's talking about? So they take somebody else's poop and they stick it in you. And, but I think it's a good idea, but then I think, their whole diet has to completely change. You have to really, you can't just do it and then let them go back to eating their mashed potatoes and bacon, So, I'll say one last thing and then I think we should wrap it up unless there's other questions. And that's cholesterol. When people's cholesterol is high and their LDLs are high, that, especially if they have a background of inflammation, that creates this thing called PPAR gamma that stimulates the osteoclast to break down bone. So cholesterol of 230 is no big deal. Cholesterol of 280, LDLs of 140 is a big deal. So you got to bring it down a little bit, at least to 220 for total cholesterol. LDLs down below 100, and you can do that with diet. There's a supplement that I really like. It's called Delta Gold, or like Designs for Health. I don't know if anybody knows Designs for Health, but there's other companies that have the Delta Gold. But it's tocotrienols, gamma and delta tocotrienols. It's a kind of vitamin E that definitely helps. But I just want to.
Delta Gold.
The Delta Gold is
It's a
tocotrienol.
vitamin
It's the gamma delta tocotrienol, not the tocopherol, but tocotrienol. So I go through all the different tocotrienols, tocopherols in the book and what they do and what they don't do. And but those two forms, the tocotrienols, help bring that LDL down, and there's not many things that help you do that. So,
Bring LDL down.
yeah.
I have a suggestion. Who would like to join a book club?
Probably a good one.
Me.
Then you can, somebody can
Because-
take over chapter 7 and somebody takes over chapter 6. And
Right, then the cool thing about it is, everybody gets busy with life.
yeah,
And if you're a part of a community and you sort of have responsibility for chapter 7, then you do your homework because you're now committed.
and now
And then the
somebody's
other-
going to talk about this thing of chapter 6 and somebody's talking about that thing of chapter 9. They go, and then because that's what happens. These things all overlap.
Yeah.
So.
Well, let me know if anybody's interested in doing that,
Yeah.
because I think that there's a huge need for it in the population. And a lot of people kind of hide behind hoping that it doesn't happen.
Yeah, and 50% of women and 20% of men are gonna get it, so.
Or they
it's-
wait until they get it.
Yeah, and that's not, and it's so much better to have that bone density at age 45 or 50, and nowhere, there's nothing out there that's cheap, like a bone density, not invasive, takes 20 minutes to have done, and it either tells you, alerts you that, hey, okay, I'm going down the bad path, or, oh, thank goodness, there's one chronic disease I don't have to worry about. And if you have one chronic disease, you're gonna have other chronic disease, because Alzheimer's, diabetes, depression, osteoporosis, cardiovascular disease, they're all related. They have an underlying inflammatory issue.
So locally, we have to find the bone density DEXA scan with that special
Type
sensitivity.
TBS, yeah.
TBS.
If you can't get the TBS, it's okay, but it's just nice if you can get to it. And let's say you've had 5 bone densities, all from one hospital. Do you go and switch to a hospital with a TBS capability?
Well, here we only have one option,
Uh,
you know.
Well,
We may have to go to
you
Miami.
you might have to go,
Tampa,
yeah.
yeah.
The nice thing about it is you're only gonna have to go to this, make that drive once
One
every
time.
year, once every 2 years. So it might be worth
Road
getting that
trip.
TBS, but it might not be. If you're not on the borderline and you're not losing bone density, then the TBS, don't get it. But if you're on the borderline of having to do a drug or not, and you don't know what your quality is, then it's a good way to go. So not everybody has to get it, is what I'm saying.
So quick, so the book would, like, there's, you know, like you were saying, with the vitamin E and ALA, and when I think of calcium, I think of plant-derived calcium. All of that is important. Is that in your book as well?
Yeah.
Okay,
But, you know, but it's hard. It's not an easy.
It's not an easy
It's not an
book.
easy read.
No, and B1 synthetic is better than the natural, from what I'm understanding. YouTube is great. I mean, a lot of the doctors are
Yeah,
on
but there's a
there.
lot of stuff on there
That you gotta, yes, discernment, absolutely.
Well, you try to do your homework, because my New Jersey doctor told me reclassed is the thing. Now in Florida, my physician said, no, you gotta be on Prolia forever, so I looked it up, and the insurance company pays it for, I think, 2 or 3 years, and then they say, for Prolia, now you have to go off it, but, you know, you just told us what would happen if you
Yeah.
do. And then when you go off it, I looked to see, well, now what? And it said, well, find something else.
But you have
so
to
you
do
figure it out
reclass.
yourself.
You cannot switch from Prolia to Fosamax or Actonel. You cannot. Those are not strong enough. Those are the oral bisphosphonates. You
Yeah.
have to do reclass.
Yeah, I
You don't have a choice.
I didn't even know you could go to reclass, because the one is telling me to do one and the other one's telling me to do the other, but
Wow.
you can go from one to the other.
And you have to, but you have to do it at the right time. If you do, let's say you're a 8-month person. You're a person that Prolia works for 8 months. And you take Prolia for 2 years. 6 months after your last injection, your doctor gives you reclass.
Oh.
Not gonna work.
Oh.
It's gonna slough off. It's gonna be like oil on water, or water on oil, I guess. Water on oil. So it's just gonna slough off, because reclass can only work if there's active bone remodeling going on.
Oh.
And that's how do you know if there's active bone remodeling? You do the CTX, because now when the Prolia is working, that number is going to be like a 50 or 100. But as soon as it wears off, it's going to jump up to 200, 250, 300. That's when you do the reclass.
And it's CTX?
The CTX.
And buy the book. Now, where can they get the book, doctor?
Go to Amazon,
Amazon.
and then do a review.
Yes.
And tell your friends. And we'll put together a book club.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks a lot for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Very
Thank you.
good.
Thank you.
very much.
If we want to learn more about you or have access to you to help us read
Yeah,
our
I do consults
CTX.
to everybody. You know, you don't have to drive up to Massachusetts. But I do phone
Road trip,
consults.
road trip, yeah.
And I just want to say, I'm reading a book that, in fact, I want to talk to you about that, The Spark of the Machine. It's about chi, and how the chi, as you mentioned, goes in between the fascia and the bone, It's so important. So if you're not getting acupuncture, you're not doing Tai Chi, and you're not doing yoga and some of these other things.
I have to tell my acupuncture story. So I was licensed in acupuncture in Illinois. When I went to chiropractic school.
Illinois?
So I was doing my internship, and so we had a chiropractic hospital, and so you're in this hospital treating patients for 6 months. But I had colitis. It's like I never have gut issues, but I had colitis. I had blood in my stool, and I mean I was really hurting for like weeks. And this one night, Ting was this. A good friend of mine from China, but he was a chiropractic student, and he was like, oh my God, like the best acupuncture student in the school. Like he was amazing. Like I can't tell you. I mean, he would put needles in people's eyes, and like he was like he was like amazing. So anyhow, I said, Ting, you gotta help me. So we snuck into this empty patient room, and which was really forbidden by the clinician. He would have killed us, but this was like at 1 o'clock in the morning. So we sneak into this room with 2 beds, and so he said, lie down. He put needles all through me, and I mean I was hurting for like weeks, and my stomach was bad, diarrhea, blood in my stool. And he says, okay, now I'm going to go lie down in the other bed, and you wake me up in 20 minutes because I'm going to sleep. I'm really tired. So at 20 minutes, I have needles all over me. And I go, Ting, wake up. And I'm thinking, I can't stay loud because the clinician will hear, but I have to wake him up. So I go, Ting. And I got these needles, I can't get up out of bed. And then I start laughing. I go, oh. Because I'm thinking, this is a little weird situation here, Clinician, Ting's sleeping, Ting's going, snoring. And it's anyhow. Finally, after like 30 minutes, he wakes up. But I'm not lying to you. 30 minutes later, I have no stomach issues. My diarrhea is gone. I mean, it was like, I go, okay, acupuncture works. Like, oh my God. So yes, getting that chi going really helps.
Yeah, I could go on and on. Not just with Doc Dave, but instead of drugs, with different issues, I've definitely, my experience with acupuncture has been phenomenal.
But the way I do it is, I give, if a person's a CTX is a 600, I say, listen, we got 5 months to get that thing down. If you're negative 3.0, so it's 600 CTX, we have 5 months to get that down. If it doesn't get down, you gotta go on a drug for a little bit. So,
what is the normal CTX?
Well, that's a good question. I say, below 400, because at 350 you're probably losing, anything above 350 you're probably starting to lose bone. The reference range is 37 to 1,037, it's crazy. But if you have 800 on a CTX, you're losing bone. Or you're either losing bone or you have a fracture. Because if you have a fracture in the last year, that CTX is going to be high, artificially high, because you have bone turnover happening. Because you have repair of that bone fracture. So your CTX is going to go high. So if that person who comes in, they just had a fracture, am I going to get that CTX? Probably not. I'll have to wait. Now I got to wait for 9 months to get that CTX, a good baseline CTX.
And you have years of experience in working with people, and I'm sure you have many stories.
To me, all this is easy, and I forget that it's a little complicated.
We haven't read your book thoroughly. Come back in about 2 years, and then you can talk to us again. We'll have really good questions.
Well, when I read the book, I get to the point and I go, really? Wow, that's interesting. I go, oh yeah, but I wrote that. But I wrote that really a year ago because I edited it and stuff. But there's so much in there that I think.
Did you channel it? No.
No, I did not.
Oh, she's not
Well,
here.
we really appreciate your coming,
Yes.
and I've got a book that I'd love to have signed, and I believe Joyce does as well. And did anybody else get the book before they came?
No.
Okay, this is pretty much
Do you
hot.
have any books
Okay.
with you?
Can I
Yeah.
just
Do you
get a
have any
picture
books
cover?
with you?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
No.
Oh, marketing.
He's
So
I'm
missing
gonna
that.
get a,
Okay.
yeah, I'm gonna get a pen.
Yeah, just get it from Amazon.
Okay, and if, you
Yeah.
didn't have a chance to.
Yeah, that's right, on Amazon you have to buy it from them to do the review.
No, you don't, I
Yeah.
thought so, but
Yeah.
somebody told me last week that you don't, and I saw a couple reviews
Okay, I
of
bet
it.
you